God says nothing here. And that silence feels like a verdict. Two brothers stand near the edge of Eden's shadow, where the soil still remembers a curse. Cain places down produce from the ground he works every day. Abel brings a lamb, then sets out the richest portions. And then the line that starts the mystery: the Lord regarded Abel and his offering, but not Cain and his. No explanation, no comment, just attention given and attention withheld. In the ancient context of the Bible, a public look from a superior could reshape your identity overnight. So what did Cain just hear in that silence? Cain's face collapses. But God doesn't praise Abel or shame Cain. He asks Cain a question. Why are you angry? And why has your face fallen? That's strange. It's as if Genesis wants you to watch Cain more than the altar. When you see the biblical background, the story isn't built like a rule book. It's built like an interrogation room. But there's another detail: the offerings are described differently. Cain brings from the fruit of the ground. Abel brings from the firstborn of his flock, and from their fat portions. That extra language feels like a clue left at the scene. Firstborn is priority, what you give before you know if you'll have enough. And fat portions were the visible luxury, the part you'd naturally keep. When you see the biblical background of sacrifice, the text is quietly asking, did Abel give first, while Cain gave eventually? Still, that doesn't fully answer it. Cain didn't bring trash, he brought food. So why does the narrative spotlight Abel's first and best, but keep Cain's gift vague? That raises a bigger question: is the problem the offering itself, or what Cain is trying to control? Listen to the names. Cain echoes the idea of acquiring, getting, holding, securing. Abel echoes vapor, breath, mist, something you can't grasp. In the ancient context of the Bible, that contrast is eerie. The one named acquired watches God. Notice the one named breath. Why would divine attention land on what feels fragile and temporary? Now the turning point comes from a single verb, and the original Hebrew meaning shows us that regarded is about turning one's gaze, paying attention, taking notice. It's relational language, not a mechanical stamp. The text never says God hates Cain. It says God doesn't look toward him in the same way, and Cain treats that difference like an insult. When you see the biblical background, the first murder begins as a fight over attention. God offers Cain a door back. If you do well, will you not be lifted up? The phrase can mean your face will be lifted, your expression, your standing, your posture. But Cain wants his face lifted by comparison, not by change. That raises another question: does Cain want God, or does he only want to win? Then comes the warning that sounds like a whisper in a dark hallway. Sin is crouching at the door. In Hebrew, the image is an animal lying in wait, and the doorway is the threshold where private desire becomes public damage. In the ancient context of the Bible, doors and gates mark points of no return. God says, it desires you, but you must rule over it. Must, not might. But the Bible stays unsettlingly quiet about Cain's response. He doesn't confess. He doesn't ask what doing well means. He doesn't even argue theology. He just moves the story to a field away from the face-to-face. The silence isn't God's anymore. It's Cain's. Cain speaks to Abel, and Genesis refuses to quote the words. That omission is part of the mystery. Whatever was said, it carried Abel into a place where only one brother walked out. Suddenly Abel is on the ground, and the ground, Cain's ground, receives blood. When you see the biblical background, it's a grotesque reversal. Cain didn't offer his best to God, and now creation receives what Cain stole. God asks another question: where is your brother? Cain answers with a sentence that sounds clever: until you hear how cold it is. Am I my brother's keeper? And the original Hebrew meaning shows us that keeper can mean guardian, one responsible for what is vulnerable. Cain refuses the role. He wanted God's regard without God's responsibility. Then the strangest witness speaks. The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. And the original Hebrew meaning shows us that crying out is a courtroom verb, an accusation that won't be silenced. In the ancient context of the Bible, the soil becomes a witness stand. Cain's world testifies against him. So why did God look at Abel, not Cain? Genesis never gives a tidy formula. Instead, it leaves a trail. Abel's gift is marked as first and best. Cain's heart is marked as wounded. Pride, and God's questions expose the real danger what a person becomes when they interpret attention as worth. When you see the biblical background, the mystery isn't God's mood. It's Cain's refusal to be reshaped. Which detail feels like the biggest missing piece to you, and what do you think Genesis wants you to sit with? If you want to explore more hidden layers like this, check out other videos on this channel.